Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our series of seminar at the Hong Kong show. I'm Gigi, your MC for today. To kick off the seminars of this exciting afternoon, we have a sharing from Mr. Renaud Anjoran to talk about sourcing tips and hacks, finding the right suppliers. Renaud Anjoran is the CEO and partner at Sofeast, and he has been in the sourcing industry for over 15 years. Before we start, I would like to remind you a few things. First, as a courtesy to our guest speaker and other audience, please turn your mobile phone to silence mode for the duration of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask our speaker questions. Please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you accordingly. Also, we must express our gratitude of thanks to the Asia World Expo as our supporting partner for live streaming our seminars. This has enabled our overseas audience to join us on the Global Sources social media platform and learn from the expert. So, for those that are watching us online, don't hesitate to drop your question in the chat box and we will have the speaker to address them. May I now invite Mr. Anjoran to share his insights on sourcing tips and hack, finding the right suppliers. Welcome, Mr. Anjoran.
Hello. Yeah, thanks a lot, Juji. Hi, everybody. And first time I speak with a mask, so I'll have to try and speak a bit louder, I guess. So I was invited by Global Sources to provide some advice on finding the right suppliers, and really the focus is on the right suppliers, right? Because finding suppliers, thanks to Global Sources, is not the difficulty, but it's really about narrowing down to the best supplier, right? My background is mostly in manufacturing quality, supplier quality management, new product development, product reliability, and things like that. So I tend to focus a little bit more on the very structured frameworks and logical approaches. Okay, so that's where I come from, and so as I say, thanks to Global Sources. The difficulty is not to get in touch with a lot of suppliers, right? And first I want to congratulate the organizers here, because Hong Kong is just reopening up, and then so fast everything is already laid out. I mean, it's just amazing, and I see some people flew in, which is a great sign. So the difficulty is not to find a lot of people. Okay, the difficulty is really to screen them, so that based on your needs, based on your company, what the volumes that you will make, etc., your situation, you actually narrow down on the best supplier. And I laid out 10 tips and hacks in this presentation, and I'm going to go through them one by one. And first is to learn at a very basic level first. Okay, what is this company? Because it's very easy to get focused on the people that you talk to, and it's very nice if they have a very smooth English, and the person you talk to is a great person, like communication-wise. But if you try to do it a little bit in a structured way, first is, okay, what is this company? And the good thing with Global Sources is that on the website you can already see a lot of information. This is just a quick screenshot that I took a few days ago, and you can see the capital invested. So okay, this looks like a manufacturer. Okay, they have some ISO certifications, etc. Okay, and you can also see certain things you can ask questions about, like how come annual sales are below $1 million? There's something here might not make sense, so maybe they have a story about that. Okay, this is a good way to start. On another profile on globalsources.com, I also saw some of these authentication and verification sort of mini reports, and you can really see the amount of authorized capital, was it paid up already, etc. Okay, when they started work, and so on and so forth. In this case, you can see they have a number of floors in a factory building, etc. Okay, that gives you an idea. okay, of the surface of this company, let's say. And this is good to start. Now, don't get focused on working with the best, like the biggest and most impressive suppliers, because maybe your orders will not be suitable for them. Maybe they will not be interested, or maybe they might accept it, but they will not be flexible at all, right? Maybe you're better off working with a smaller company that might be more suitable to your needs, will be more flexible, will be faster, etc., etc. Okay. And you need to keep in mind that there are some unpleasant surprises sometimes with some suppliers. Okay, and there's tens of thousands of suppliers out there, right? Including some maybe that are walking around here, trying to pass their name card on to you, and you don't know anything about them, right? So that's why really it's important to focus on the company, have an idea. And I want very quickly to go through this list, because people have to keep this in mind. You might wire a deposit without really checking them at all, and then maybe they disappear, right? This is just basic scammers. Now, you'll not find them around here, very improbable, but out there are people like that. There's a lot of companies that had some unpleasant surprises, that they saw that the price increased after they wired some money, or they did an order and then without any warning or any explanation, the price rose after that, right? Without good communication. Okay, we'll get back into that. IP rights, especially if it's your own product, could be misused, could be sold to other companies, etc., etc. Okay, they might not tell you where the manufacturing is done. Okay, that in itself might not be a huge red flag, but if they change from one order to the next to another factory, the product itself might be quite different, and you had no way of seeing it, right? Yeah, late deliveries, inconsistent communication, etc. This is just, let's say, poorly structured suppliers. And then also the inability or unwillingness to reach your quality standard, while maybe saying, yes, 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 we can do it, right? So communication is very important, but also understanding who they work with and trying to understand at what standard, at what level they usually operate. Quite important. And you can ask some questions. You can mention, hey, we'll get your factory audited, see what they say. Hey, we'll send a third-party inspection company to check before the goods are shipped out, and see if they say, yeah, of course, all of this is standard. This is good. But if they start to say, well, then you might try to wonder why they're so worried about that. You can Google them, maybe their company name and scam or scammer. Do they participate in trade shows? That's usually a good thing. There are some tips. I'm not going to go and read through everything. If you want after that, you can just send me an email or give me your name card. I will send you a link to the presentation. There are some questions you can ask. I'm going to go through some of them quickly. And it's much better if you do it face to face. This is a great time. Otherwise, do it in a live call, but don't do that over email, because people are much more likely to tell the truth. We found just if you're in front of them, right? It's much easier through an email to distort reality. Let's say, okay, ask some basic information. How many people in the factory? Do you have an export license? How does it work? Try to see, maybe the owner is there. Sometimes it happens. But try to get a little bit of a feeling about the background of the owner, because if that person used to be a salesperson, maybe they have very little technical understanding of about the product and so on. Okay, what are their main products? What do they do in their factory? What are the main processes, etc. This will give you an idea about what exactly is behind the booth, right? What kind of factory it is. And why am I suggesting you ask all these questions? Because it's quite different to work with a company that has technical ability, that does a lot of these processes in-house. They will have much better control about what happens, versus a company that has little understanding of what's going on and tend to subcontract a lot of things. Okay. These are some other questions. You try to Try to understand basically also their size, as I mentioned. If you try to go to a supplier that's too big for you, they might not be interested, they might not be flexible, their price might be much higher, they might drop you at any point, right? So it's quite important to see if there's a good fit between you and them. You have to be a good fit for them, and they have to be a good fit for you, right? It goes both ways. Okay. Customer references. Okay, this is a bit of a tricky topic because they don't really want to tell you, their customer list. They don't know you. You might be a competitor. You might be who knows what, right? So it's normal that they hold off on some of that information. Maybe they just tell you one or two key customers that they also mention on their website, and that's it. Okay, that is not a red flag, right? Now you need to have a honest conversation about them, about maybe when you could have contact information of one of their customers, maybe to talk to them, but you have to show them first that you've done your homework, and there's a high chance that this relationship goes into a business relationship, right? Otherwise, it's normal that they might hold off on some of this information. Try to see if it's the same company name. On right here on the booth, on the name cards, everywhere, right? They prepare a pro forma invoice for you. Is it the same company? If not, that might not be a red flag, but they should explain to you what is the story, and then you should be able to check exactly what is the relationship between these different companies. Okay. Yeah. So 9001 certificates and any like CE certificate, FCC certificate, etc., you should be able to check them because hey, there's some fakes, or there's you just need to do a little bit of homework right now, rather than finding out that it's a fake maybe in 1 year after you've purchased $1 million of it, right? Okay. If you are planning to develop a new product with one of these suppliers, or if you're going to pick one of their products and you're going to tell them, I want to tweak this, I want maybe to remove this feature, I want to add this different feature, you will need them to do some engineering work, okay? So you need to understand what exactly do they do in-house, okay? Here, this is mostly electronic products, so I'm gonna take some examples from electronics. If you buy tablets or smartphones, or also laptops, very, very often you have these companies that just do the final assembling and some testing, but that don't actually do the R&D work. They buy the chipset and they buy a number of components from one or two key suppliers, and they just rely on them. So if you ask them to make some changes, they will rely on this sub-supplier to make the changes, etc., etc. This is not ideal, okay? And a lot of these other suppliers do all of this in-house, and they control all of this. So it's important to know really their place in the supply chain and where the R&D work would be done, okay? And I made a little bit of a list. So CAD compatibility, well, usually step file, Gerber files, I mean, all of this is very standard, but in some cases there are some issues. So it's always good to keep this in mind. It might be an issue if you do some of the design work on your side and you send it to them. Okay. Can they actually do some of the engineering design? What kind of engineers do they have in-house? Okay, these are simple questions, but also it's good to ask them to show some examples of product and what exactly they have designed themselves. Okay, don't look at products that are exhibited here and think, okay, they developed this product from scratch. In some cases, that's the case. In some cases, their customers did all the work. Who knows, right? So you need to ask some questions and make up your own opinion. Okay. Yeah, number 3 is basically the same idea. The engineering design, the prototyping. Do they actually do that in-house? And also, point 4 is how do they test these prototypes? Do they just plug things and turn it on, or can they also do some accelerated live test and some other stress tests and so on, right? To really see if the new product design is robust or if it's likely to fail. Number 5, okay. Again, that's really if you design a new product from scratch here. the very big companies, the Huawei, the Haier, Lenovo, and so on, when they develop a new product, they do it in a very structured manner. There are stage gates with approvals, and that's how they really control that this product is really going to be functioning, is going to be reliable, is going to be compliant, and so on and so forth. Much smaller companies very often tend to wing it. They don't have a structured process, so it's good to ask some questions about how they develop a new product. Maybe it's too small for you to read, but basically in the electronics, in consumer electronics, in this industry, and especially American companies tend to have this very common framework now of engineering validation testing, design validation testing, production validation testing before it goes into mass production, right? This is just an example. You can ask them how they do, okay? And I'm not going to go through all this, but there is a lot of work involved for a new electronic product that maybe has firmware, maybe there's a number of things, there's some tooling to make for the custom enclosure, for example, okay? Subjective evaluation, well, that's if you can go on site. So for example, if it's a manufacturer in Vietnam, it will be easier for you to go there than if they're in China, obviously, okay? But to give you a bit of an idea, it's really, is it a good fit, right? So the significance of your orders, I found, is very, very important. You're going to place orders that are just 0.5% of their total capacity. Well, you're going to be considered a very small customer. You're not going to have a senior project manager working for you, right? The main focus, do they tend to work on high quality, low volume orders versus the opposite? What countries do they tend to work to sell into? Are they used to all the compliance, the certifications that are required, and so on, right? Are you in contact with a few people or just one person who might disappear? Okay, there's a lot of things like this. I'm not going to go through all the list because I have to finish in half an hour. There are a few red flags if you go and visit them, right? If the boss is always in the office, if they all have their tiny office, they're never on the shop floor, they cannot show you some ongoing improvement projects, that is not very good, okay? Because as a manufacturer, if you don't have resources constantly working on fixing problems and at the same time improving the systems and processes, they're not going to get to a level of very good and consistently good performance. Okay. Also, if you see that they might rely too much on one key customer might be maybe 60% of their business. Well, that's a problem, right? Because if that key customer goes somewhere else, maybe this supplier might go down, right? That's also a risk for you, the buyer. Okay. These are obvious things. Is it clean? How about the equipment? Is it recent? Where does it come from, etc.? Again, I can send you the presentation. I'm not going to go through all this and bore you with all these points. Factory quality audits, a very, very common tool to actually review in a structured manner their quality system, right? And if there are any holes, any obvious risks. But first, before you do that, you really need to think again, what kind of supplier should I work with? Okay, if you think that your business, the size of your orders and so on, is going to make it interesting for a large manufacturer to work with you, then you can place the bar here. You can say, okay, I want a manufacturer with a solid quality management system. But if that's not the case, you will have to actually put more resources on your side to keep checking product quality more carefully over time, especially on the first few orders, because you don't know if they can consistently do a good job for you. Okay, so with that said, factory quality audit, 10,000 feet view. Do they actually check the components before they use them for assembly? Do they check what they're doing? Do they check the final product? Is it with a proper checklist? Is it documented and so on? What about the testing equipment? Is it appropriate? Is it calibrated? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. How do they store the components? For example, we see some factories storing batteries in a non-air conditioned place for 6 months sometimes, which is nuts. It's pretty bad, right? It's just an example. How are the people trained? How are the operators supposed to know what they have to do? And same thing for the inspectors. Do they have a golden sample? Do they have a checklist? Do they have photos about the different kinds of defects? What about the functional testing rigs? What about all of these things that they're supposed to do? Okay. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. Social compliance audits, I'm going to go very fast on this because usually in the consumer electronics industry is not a huge issue. It's much more of an issue, for example, in the apparel industry. Usually electronics factories tend to, especially in Shenzhen, Dongguan, they tend to make efforts to get good staff, right? And they tend to pay them well and so on. It tends to be less of an issue. But it might be an issue, for example, if you have a brand and you want to really make sure that nothing might tarnish your brand, or if you start to work with a big retailer that themselves will have some requirements for social compliance. And usually, yeah, it's compliance with laws, you know, no children working, obviously, no forced labor, respect of you know, basic health and safety requirements and so on. This is becoming an issue for some electronic products. For example, the photovoltaic modules, right? With the polycarbonate material might be sourced from a certain western province of China, and this is becoming a problem with some of the regulations in the US and in Europe. Apart from that, it usually is not a big problem in this industry. Okay. Going deeper, I mentioned the quality audits, quality system audits. It's also possible to do it in a different way. Instead of focusing a lot on the quality system, to focus more on the processes, the manufacturing and testing processes, right? And this requires obviously a more technically apt auditor, right? But if you really want to understand the reliability of the factory itself to do a good job, and to really see if they know what they're doing, right? If they understand what they're doing. So I'm going to go very, very fast. Again, new product introduction, right? Remember that graph with the different gates? Extremely important. And also, what are the deliverables when they develop a new product? Do they have risk analysis that are formalized? Do they put together a control plan? And so on and so forth. Okay. Management systems. Yes. What kind of KPIs do they keep an eye on? You know, for example, for quality, it might be first pass yield, meaning proportion of the products that go all the way through the processes without any rework or without being scrapped. There's a lot of different things, but do they focus on meaningful KPIs? And does it actually drive change? Does it drive action? Okay. These are important questions, I would say. Continuous improvement, as I mentioned before, if they don't have if they don't really put a lot of resources into fixing the problems as they appear, but really when there are big problems, to go down to the root cause of these issues and fixing them and making sure they are fixed. If they don't do that, this is not going to be a very consistently good manufacturer. Okay, do they have a how to say, a framework for that? Who is doing this? How often do they work on that? This is very, very important. Okay. Equipment maintenance. So if you work with a factory that just keeps things together with a few screwdrivers, this is not much of an issue, even though they should still check the torque of the screwdrivers regularly and so on and so forth. But very often they also have some equipment, of course, the SMT machines, the reflow oven, etc. And they have to have a preventive maintenance plan, and they have to work to that plan. Very, very important. Otherwise, this will impact quality, and this will also impact delivery performance. Okay, process controls this is a very simple example for manual operations, assembly operations. Actually make it impossible for them to do things the wrong way. This is a great approach, but process control goes much, much deeper than that. Okay, do they actually measure the capability of their process at some critical points? Okay, then it goes into statistical tools and so on. I'm not going to go into this, a bit outside the scope of today's presentation, but do they actually put a lot of emphasis on preventing the issues, right? On adding some controls, on improving their processes. This is really key. Testing capabilities, I'm going to go quickly over this, but they should not just have a few calipers and micrometers and measurement tapes, right? It does take more than that. Okay, so you need to, maybe the simplest way, if you can visit a factory, is simply to pick a product, maybe when they're doing the outgoing inspection, and say, okay, how do you test this product? Show me. And then you look at what they can actually test in-house, versus when they say, well, this we have to send to a lab outside. Well, then it doesn't happen very often, right? Okay, if you need more in-depth due diligence, so if you're going to place relatively small orders, skip this one. But if you're going to sort of get married to one supplier and work with them for years to come, you might need to know a little bit more. Okay, and that's where you might work maybe with a law firm or an accounting firm. Sometimes they can really go and dig more information. Okay, also the quickest and cheapest way to do this sometimes to do a credit check. Just like when you export to a company in another country, it's very common to do a credit check to see if they are in good financial health and they will pay you. Well, same thing. You can do it on a potential supplier to see if that credit check report will give you the right information. You will know if they have a lot of debt, if they are in the red, or if they're profitable. These kinds of things is quite important. Also, respect for regulations. If you start to work with people who do, for example, in China, plating, painting, all the surface treatment, and or more generally, any operations that are very potentially very polluting. Well, do they have a license for that? Do they do it according to the law? Or maybe they might be shut down any time. Okay, that's just an example. And the last point, try to be a little bit organized when you request for quotations. Okay, so it's good to talk with people to gather information. Try to have a little bit of a guide, okay, on what to ask for, so you can later compare apples to apples. If you find, for example, 5 potential suppliers that look good, then you can compare your notes. And then after that, you can send them a little bit more of a formal maybe request for information first, and then request for quotation. Okay. Otherwise, if you are a first-time buyer and they feel you are a first-time buyer, well, they might take some liberties that they would not otherwise. And this is not going in your, this is not really in your interest as a buyer, okay? And you can, some buyers see maybe they put some pressure on price. Oh, this is $17. No, I have to buy it $14. How do they react? You might learn a lot from that, right? Again, mention that they would be audited such and such way, and so on. How do they react? Are they confident, right? There's a lot of things. This is really the last important concept: trust and motivation. These are really 2 very, very important things here. I keep talking about systems and frameworks and things like that, but really, if you don't have trust and they don't provide the confidence and they don't have the behavior that really deserve the trust, you might go into all kinds of issues, right? And it can impact you all the way through. They might say, yes, we can do it, and they might be unable to reach your quality standard. They might say, oh yeah, we make it in this factory, don't worry, this is going to be in such and such material, and then they do something else, right? So, but if you motivate them, if you show them, this is my business, this is the potential, etc., etc., if they're motivated, it's much less likely that they will play such games. Okay, I think we again, you can ask me for the presentation. Just send me an email or give me your name card after that, and let's open it for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anjoran, for the insightful sharing. Please remain on stage and we will move on to the Q&A session. If there's any questions from the floor, please raise your hand and we will pass the microphone to you accordingly.
Did I talk too much?
So if there's no questions from the floor, before you leave the stage, we would like to invite our representative of Global Sources, Mr. Tom McGranery, to present you with a memento with a gratitude of thanks. Mr. McGranery, please. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. We will take a short break now and we'll resume at 3:15 p.m. for the session on Innovative Application for the Future of Biz and Industry, co-organized with InQ Lab. A panel of startup elites will discuss on what innovative solution can tech innovator develop for solving the present and future pain point of biz and industry. See you soon.